Hey everyone.
Hey everybody, how's it?
Good, good. Someone's got control of this.
Not me.
It's not me either.
It's not, hello everyone, it can't be me.
Hi everyone, it's Marianne here. I hope
Hi,
I have.
Marianne. Have you got control of it?
I hope so.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Greetings, salutations.
Salutations.
Right. We got Cliff.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Stephen.
Oh, we got David. That's good. So we got a full house on our side. That's great.
And we've got 27 participants lined up so far.
Well, that's good.
21. If we exclude ourselves.
If we exclude ourselves, yeah. No.
Well, that's
Yeah.
fine.
No double counting allowed.
Just be careful, man. Be careful, because they can all hit you as well, eh?
There we go.
Creative accounting there, Cliff.
Yeah.
We've got to get the numbers up somehow.
Yeah.
That's good.
I see the Green Building Council has just announced their new CEO.
And anybody we know?
I've met her, Lisa Reynolds, been involved in the Green Building Council for quite a while. Been involved in greening and bunny hugging for a long time.
That was announced some time ago because Manfred stepped down, didn't he?
Was he acting CEO?
Manfred was there for 3 or 4 years, wasn't he?
But I don't think he was CEO.
Oh, okay, maybe.
Okay. So from Teresa, good day, and good day to all. So it's 12 o'clock on my screen. So we got 33 participants, including us. So shall we kick off? Let's see if we can.
John, just a question. I see if I look at the attendees, it's Teresa has been repeated 27 times. I don't know if that is a concern or it's
Marianne,
just
David, Marianne sent out a message. Marianne, do you want to just tell everybody what you said on the WhatsApp message?
Yes, unfortunately, I shared the same link to everyone. So the first person that registered, everybody's got the same name as the first person. So the option where you can change your name if you just click on your name for all the participants.
So we've just single-handedly solved the cloning problem.
So what we can say is welcome to all the Teresas, all 27 of them.
Will the real Teresa please stand up?
Yeah. Right. Right. So welcome to everyone to this the second of our SAFMA topical webinars in this time of, well, what's lockdown or lockdown level 4, which is opening up. And this webinar is actually a repeat of the first one. It's probably the only time that we will necessarily repeat one, but what happened was the response to the first one was that big that we thought, and we thought we'd close people out. So what we've done is we're repeating the first one that we had with a slight variation that given the speed with which things happen in this at the moment, will update our thinking. You might say, well, what can happen in a week? Well, In COVID-19 in South Africa, a week is a long time. Lots can happen. And fortunately and unfortunately. So this is the second in our webinars. And as we said, we've got, looking forward, we've got local and international speakers that we're going to be looking at. We've got a range of topics that we've picked up on. We picked up on topics from the last webinar. And the big thing is that we've got topics that we'll run through. We've got four speakers. We're going to talk on 4 different aspects. But we welcome questions, we welcome inputs, and the mechanism is you put your questions in, we will pick them up, we will answer the questions, some of them in the last 10 minutes of this webinar, and then in a couple of weeks' time, we've got a speaker and we've got a longer question and answer session. So we're going to go back and debate issues then. That have come up from the different webinars that are held. So the first one was a sellout, and this is, as I say, is a repeat. So if anyone was in the first one, they're going to hear a lot of the about that in this one. So what we're looking at this time is the same, which we're going to run through 4 different aspects of getting back to work. We're going to look at staff and visitors, which will be the first speaker is Andrew. The second one will be workplace planning, which is David. Then at the end of David, we will launch the questionnaire for online responses, and there are a few questions that we've got that we will put to everyone, and we're looking for people to respond on that. So sort of online survey. Then Stephen Malloy will talk on soft facilities management, and that'll be followed by Cliff, who's going to talk on hard facilities management. That should take us to about 10:02. Provided no one overruns the time too badly, and then we'll have a question and answer session. So your questions are welcomed. You've got the ability to type those questions in, and we look forward to that. The topics we've picked are what we think are topical for this first webinar. Future webinars will have got topics which have come out of the first webinar we held, and we've already had a lot of interest in, as will be covered by Cliff, in HVAC. We've identified cleaning, so these will be specific topics in future webinars that we've got lined up at the moment. And other topics will come from you, our members, and from what's going on in the marketplace and what the regulations say and how we're able to get South Africa back and working in a safe environment. Challenges for all of us. So the first webinar we've taken off. The second webinar is this one. The next webinar is World FM Day, hosted by Andrew. The next one after that will be Paul McChrystal from Dubai. And then we're looking at answering questions. Number 5, fire safety in the workspace management. And then we're looking at workspace fogging and another guest speaker. And then after that, number 6, we're talking about getting into June already, will be topics. And I haven't updated this, but we've already got topics for number 6. So think about number 6 in 4th of June, and the next one will be following on from there. We're looking every 2 weeks, so 4th of June, add 14 days, 18th of June. So the first speaker is Andrew. And Andrew, do you want to then take it away on staff and visitors, please?
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, you're a bit light.
A bit light? No, I've never been light in my life, John.
Well, today you're light.
All right.
That's a world first.
Okay, so morning everybody. When John says this is a repeat, it's not literally physically a repeat. We are live, but we're going through the same material. So by way of an introduction, many facility managers have been working during this period of lockdown in support of essential services, and we really take our hat off to them. But those of you as FMs that have been in lockdown will, however, now be the first responders in ensuring that workers feel secure going back to work when buildings fully reopen. We need to understand that COVID-19 cases are still on the rise in South Africa, so coming out of lockdown is hugely risky. But the government cannot wait to flatten the curve, as in other countries, due to our economic and social circumstances. As our very own South Africa's own Clem Santa said yesterday, until a vaccine is found, which is probably 18 months away, the nightmare scenario of a runaway pandemic should serve as a warning to all those leaders and policymakers who want to dismantle the current measures of containment too soon. But here we are. We are in level 4, most of us, I think, the whole country's in level 4. But the chances of us getting a second wave of the virus are very likely. I mean, countries such as Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and even Germany have had spikes following the release of lockdown. So we need to get it right. And you guys are front and center in terms of getting it right. So we want to be able to give you some advice and look to see how we can do that. So the first item on the agenda is legislation. What do we actually have to abide by? Well, right at the top of the tree is the National Command Council, and they have powers under the Disaster Management Act 2002, which is why the President issued that national state of disaster, which sounds awful, but I think we weren't really prepared for what was coming our way. The latest risk-adjusted strategy regulations were issued last week, and we are on alert level 4. I don't know of anywhere in the country that's not come down to level 4. But please note that in the event of a second wave, this may result in what's called adaptive triggering of a new lockdown regulation, which will go back to 5 or potentially even worse. So let's not let that happen. We do know now that the wearing of face masks in public place is now mandatory, and that includes in the workplace. The workplace is a public forum. Okay, secondly, legislation, obviously the Health and Safety at Work Act is very important to us. The Department of Employment and Labour have produced a workplace preparedness advisory for COVID-19. What they're saying is, in précis, the individual businesses or workplace must, and that means must, have a COVID-19 risk assessment and plans in place. If you have a risk assessment, that's fine, you can update it, but it has to be updated in line with the requirements. What does that mean? Well, the headlines are, he said, and his screen has just gone blank, would you believe? Yep, thank you. You need to assign in writing and place in a prominent position the names of a compliance officer for the COVID situation. Okay, what does that mean? His duty or her duty is to ensure that you need to calculate the maximum number of customers and employees that can be inside the premises at any one time. And you need to take steps to ensure and maintain, and most importantly, it says control the distance of 1.5 meters from each other. And by control, that means active control. Just placing signs and ticker tape on the floor is not good enough. You need to have active control. Quite interestingly, the Chief Scientific Officer in the UK was on TV yesterday saying, what's the difference between 1 meter, 2 meters, etc. We're talking about 1.5 meters in this country. Most people are talking about 6 feet, which is 1.8 meters, or 2 meters. Well, the Chief Scientific Officer in the UK said the difference between 1 meter social distance and 2 meter social distance is a factor of 30 times the risk of getting the virus. So please, 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 guys, let's make sure we're working above 1.5 meters to 2 meters, but 1.5 meters is the minimum distance. You need to be able to enable employees to work from home where they can. You need to provide adequate space, and David will talk about that a little bit later. You need to restrict the face-to-face meetings, the provision of hand sanitizers at all entrances and areas of risk, like at the bottom of stairs, etc., bathrooms, obviously. We need to make special measures for employees with known health risks. That's known health risks. So if they declare a comorbidity or a health risk, you need to take an action, make an action plan and make those employees and special measures for those employees to feel safe. and that includes for people over the age of 60. You must also conduct worker education on COVID-19 and the protection measures, and that means identification of vulnerable employees, as we just said, the safe transportation of employees. Your responsibility for transportation of employees needs to be taken into consideration. The screening of employees and visitors on entering the workplace, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. Obviously, the prevention of viral spread through social distancing, the cleaning of surfaces, which Stephen will take you through, the management of sick employees. If somebody falls sick on your premises, you need to have plans in place. I'll touch on that. And good ventilation, which is obviously mostly in South Africa, it's HVAC, but obviously opening up the windows, and the implementation of workplace controls. There is a third act that you need to take into consideration, and that's the POPI Act, the Protection of Personal Information Act. Why is that necessary? Well, the regulations say you need to take the temperature of people when they enter the workspace, okay? That means that there is no consent required from somebody to take their temperature. So if somebody refuses, you are within your rights to refuse them entry into the workplace, okay? What's more is you need to take notes of everybody that you take the temperature of, and obviously any temperature above the prescribed minimum needs to be recorded and provided for tracking and tracing purposes. Okay, so now let's go to a return to work strategy. You need to start planning the return now, okay? Guidelines with key stakeholders. Key stakeholders will be risk, legal, HR, IT, okay? Set up a steering committee to ensure those individuals are involved, okay? And you need to nominate the responsible person and place that person on notice, and a notice in a prominent position that tells everybody who is the go-to person. That's likely to be an FM person, but obviously doesn't have to be. You need to assess the maximum capacity of people in the workplace. You need to identify key employees who are in the office more than others, and that's such as the facilities team. You need to consider the staggering of teams on their return to work, and those that are at work stagger their start and end of shifts, so you're not getting congestion at the egress or ingress into the buildings, okay? Rotation of employees will be required with deep cleaning carried out in between those rotations. You need to maintain a list of members in each rotation group for tracking purposes, okay? In terms of updating your workplace risk assessment, as I said, you are required by law to revise and update your risk assessment in line with the COVID requirements, okay? You need to look at things like the hierarchy of controls. In any risk assessment, you have the hierarchy of controls. Top of the list is engineering controls. Second below that, administrative controls, then safe work practices, and fourthly is PPE. Please do not use PPE as the first line of defense, okay? It is only a last resort, and it must have clear guidance for correct usage. We've seen many people on TV putting their face masks on wrong. Okay, next is your standard operating procedures and practices. You need to make new work policies and office guidance more visible with printed signage and documents online. We'll talk about communication in a minute. You need to encourage staff to do a personal risk assessment. They need to take their temperatures before setting off to work every day. That is good practice. It is not law, but it's good practice. Publish and communicate revised floor plans and work settings, who's going to be sitting where. And you need to provide for signposting on one-way traffic patterns around the workplace, so you're not getting people walking past each other in the corridor. It might mean you have to go the long way round to the loo, but so be it. It's a small price to pay. You need to identify potential high-risk areas such as lifts, water coolers, pause areas, meeting rooms, restaurants, corridors, smoking areas, bathrooms, etc. Okay, we're talking about in some instances only one person in the lift, which if you work on the 33rd floor is going to be difficult, but you'll have to make a plan. You need to be able to isolate workers to carry out their tasks. Those that can carry out their tasks alone, put them in spare meeting rooms, okay? You need to set times for meal breaks to reduce the number of people in cafeterias, and all staff, as I said, need to monitor their health and self-quarantine if they show any symptoms. You are entitled to remove somebody from the workplace if they are showing symptoms. If they do show symptoms, quarantine them for a period of time until they can get transport to go home. Okay. As I said, provide PPE in high-touch areas, the use of things like sneeze screens, etc., on reception desks. But I think David will talk to you a little bit more about that. Okay, you need to be able to adapt the workplace to accommodate social distancing. You need to make sure those layout changes are made before anybody returns to work. Okay. Cleaning protocols, Stephen will take you through. Information and signage. Placing posters at entrances that encourage staying at home when sick. Coughing and sneezing etiquette and hand hygiene are very, very important. Okay. As I said earlier on, you need, however, to provide active control of the social distancing. Okay. Just putting posters up is not good enough. Okay. Transportation, I said, you need to request workers use individual rather than collective transport, but what can you do? You can make car parking available. There's not going to be as many people in the office. Staggering is probably going to mean in the first instance, only 10 to 15% of workers are going to be in the office, okay? So car parking is going to be available. So if they can use their cars, please allow them to do so. Places for storing bikes, or encourage your workers, where possible in South Africa, to walk to work. Okay.
David, Andrew, it's about a minute and just over.
Okay, I'll be there just now. Meetings, you need to discourage meetings. We've talked about, but where you do have meetings, have a preparedness plan and take note of who's at that meeting for tracking and tracing purposes. I mentioned visitors. Limit the physical interaction with customers. You can take their temperature, you must take their temperature, I should say, and you can refuse them entry if they don't. In all of this, if alternative measures are not appropriate or sufficient to ensure the safety of employees or visitors, it may be as a last resort that you have to shut your operations. Now, we don't want that. So please, please, please be proactive, okay? Communicate. In times of crisis, you cannot over-communicate. Use all forms of communication, physical, digital, notice boards, corona scoreboards, table talkers, memos, emails, etc. Okay. And last, if we do have a return to level 5 or worse, you need to plan and learn for the future. It's important to draw up and update crisis plans, disaster recovery plans, and business continuity plans. Those 3 plans have 3 very different focuses. Crisis, in a crisis, disaster, how do you recover from that disaster, and how do you continue business through that disaster? And John, that is me and my time. Thank you very much, everybody. I wish you well. I'm going to go and have a look at the chat board and see if I can answer any of your questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Andrew. That's great. And then to anyone that listened to the last week will have found that what they got this week was an update on last week as well. So our next speaker, David. David, let's run on to the next. Workspace planning, David. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and welcome everyone. I hope you can all hear me.
Yes.
What I'm covering is I'm going to be slightly different from my last webinar. What Andrew stated as well is more look at the practical applications and the real life, just to give you some insight of what we're doing in our organizations, and therefore to help you guys to put your plans and your actions into place under the various heading. So I might cover other things that you might not have heard, but I also will maybe repeat what Andrew has stated earlier. So from a spatial separation, especially, I called it spatial from an office planning point of view and from a design point of view. And social distancing is more about the common space, the reception areas that we look after and entering into the buildings. And I'll pick those up in the various headings. Especially under level 4, with now the restriction has decreased in terms of the number of people coming into your various facilities. So your demands and your turnaround time is going to be critical. So it's not in the headings, but security, for example, assisting with temperature check. And how do you monitor people coming in when you're getting a lot more crowds coming into the buildings? Not necessarily visitors, but your staff complement coming back. So the use of thermal cameras and creating queues to be able to fast track the temperature measures. People at the moment we're doing a manual in most of our premises. We're doing a manual system. And I'm sure you guys are where each individually scanned, but as the frequency and the number of people coming in increases, technology would assist. It's It's quite a big expense, but as Andrew stated, this will probably stay with us for quite a long time. So it's an investment going forward in terms of easing the influx of people coming in or speeding up. So it's very important to do that. Similarly with transport, other things that we look at implementing is scanning people before they come into your shuttles. So you're actually turning people away if needs be to go back home if they are showing any symptoms before they even come into your offices. So that might be another practical way of doing it. Your drivers could do that. And again, going back to communication, very important that you communicate what are the criteria. That you will be scanned up front, you will be asked to go home if you show any of the symptoms. If you could do that up front from your home, do a self-assessment. There are apps available that you can buy or subscribe to, where your employees could self-diagnose up front, and that will keep a database that will be shared with your HR and yourself, and will stop people to even come into the office. So going back to just layouts and office desk, again, keeping the 1.5 meter distance. A good scenario, which I shared last time, was to stagger your operation of, especially in clusters. So one person per desk, but with having one desk on either side of them being vacant and nobody opposite them as well. So they can keep social distancing on that. One of the questions that came up in the last webinar was the use of Shield. I think use of Shield is good, especially where people have one-to-one conversation, even though they might keep a distance of 1.5 meters. For example, your receptionists, your tellers, your people that have interaction with people on a daily basis. So the shields is definitely in the office space where people have less interaction with individuals. With the force of using the mask, I think that should be used all the time. The only exception might be when you are on the phone, especially at call centers, but then the social shield might be a good added measure to help, especially if the density is higher than the 1.5, or you feel the density is high. In terms of meeting rooms and training rooms, we're seeing a little bit of these meetings coming back as the population comes back into the premises. So one of the practical idea is to mark with an X where people cannot sit, and marks with a tick with stickers, using removable stickers to re-emphasize social distancing. So people know exactly where they can sit and where they cannot sit, be it in meeting rooms or in training room. Training room as well is halving your capacity. So if you have a training room of 20, to keep your social distancing, reducing it to about 50% down to potentially 10. And that helps as well to use those room appropriately. Also the use of technology, excuse me, VR or Zoom or Teams, and you can have multiple meetings at the same place, and people could use multiple rooms. And we're seeing a big trend towards training moving away from physical training to virtual training. So which makes more space available. Agile spaces, again, I would only use a single agile space. I would push away people to use other technology type of collaborative work rather than agile spaces, because agile spaces tend to be smaller, and therefore it's very hard to keep social distancing unless you are using a single pod. But even so, I would expect lots of more cleaning of these pods if they are being used, and the frequency thereof. From a canteen, staff, restaurant, again, if you have able to do a roster where people only come at a certain time, depending on the size of your organization, It does help with preparation from a caterer point of view, and you're able to implement a roster of people coming down to collect the meal or purchase. Otherwise, it's another one is to use similar to what the retail shops are doing, only having so many people at any one time picking up their meals. And again, the meal should always be, if possible, pre-packed, easy to use, one person collecting, or be careful or having a team leader collecting for multiple people, especially if that person is showing symptoms. Okay, we've had cases where somebody had been maybe showing symptoms and collecting for their whole team. And then when you do the track and tracing, you could have up to 22 people or multiple people being off work.
Just over a minute there, David.
Okay, I'll rush through the last two. Retail shop, I think most of them have got have to comply, and they know in terms of capacity, putting lines, a lot of signage, a lot of visual prompt. The same with lifts. Auditorium is similar as well. Events and gathering will reduce, shouldn't be in place. But again, there's creative way to do that using multiple venue and technology behind it. So I think as facilities managers, we have to enforce and take the lead, especially using your health and safety team and your paramedics to take a lead for business, and to if they have to turn people away, they have to turn people away. They will have to enforce it and to advise business that they take precedence over any operational needs. Okay, so that's my story today, and I hope it's helpful. And if there's any questions, please send them through, and we'll try to help you where we can. Back over to you, John.
Thank you, David. Yeah, and as far as questions goes, listen, we haven't got all the answers. We share the questions around, and collectively we'll come up with a position that we think is best practice for South Africa. Marianne will now launch as well the poll, the survey poll. We've got some questions for you all the members that you can please come back to us. This is us collecting information that we can then share with everyone. So this is a collaborative effort on how we on how we can manage the workplace in South Africa. Right, the next one is soft facilities management. Stephen, that's you. Thanks very much. On for your 10 minutes. Thank you. No, you're not switched on. You're muted still, Stephen. There we go.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
That's great. Thank you all and welcome. I'm going to look at the changes in soft services, and if you can just put the slide on, please, John, which is
yeah, right. There we go.
The
Your lady
diagram of that is correct. Yes. So what we have there is a typical scenario how at A, you have the virus inside the person's body, and it's typically in the lungs, and it gets expressed out the lungs in B when we talk or if we cough, etc. And then under point C, you have where it's passed on via touching things through the hands, etc. So all the yellow areas, it looks yellow on my side, on this pause area, this kitchen area, cupboards and desks, will show where the virus gets deposited, normally on little droplets on the surfaces, and where we need to start tackling the issues. So under point D, you'll see that in a typical desk where you can be sitting and working, or at a pause area, where the viruses gets deposits, and also the equipment, various equipment, and we'll discuss how the cleaning needs to be changed with the onset of the virus. So in short, we're looking at deep cleaning principles, where very similar to what they do in hospitals currently. And the deep cleaning is a combination of your normal cleaning practices that you have in facilities, and then an additional cleaning, which involves your sanitizing and elimination of the viruses. So your initial cleaning, it's in your areas of your D's and your C's, those areas that are all touched. You will need to clean more frequently on high usage areas and areas that are touched often in C. You're looking at handles of doors, handles of lifts, telephones, computers, glass surfaces, taps, and countertops. And the first part before the actual sanitizing takes place is the normal cleaning of these areas. And the purpose is to remove the dirt. Specifically, the dirt actually creates a biofilm which protects the viruses. So if you sanitize before carrying out your first line of cleaning, the virus actually gets protected. So once you clean the biofilm off, you then have a chance to use your various sanitizing products. And for SAFMA, we recommend the surfaces cleaning products with a 10% bleach solution or a minimum 70% ethanol-based sanitizers to fully sanitize the surface. And very importantly is the sanitizing products need to be carried out in a specific way that they have a dwell time. A dwell time is the amount of time that you spend on these surfaces so that the viruses can be terminated. So typically your dwell time on various chemicals, and you'll have to see on the sanitizers you buy, can be 30 seconds, or some of them can be up to 10 minutes, depending on the brand and your content of bleach or content of alcohol. So there again, your cleaning practices must be adopted to what chemicals and sanitizers you use. In terms of, let me just get my thing here. In terms of frequencies, we recommend as a minimum that once a shift or once every change of staff, in the morning or in the evening, depending on your organization, you have a full cleaning program in place. The high use areas like your canteen, pause areas, lifts, toilet, etc., those high risk areas, based on your risk assessment, as Andrew said in the beginning, you would need to increase this frequency perhaps every 4 hours, perhaps even higher, depending on how these areas are used. So again, the whole emphasis is what's your risk, what's your usage of the area, and then it will come through on the frequency of the cleaning process. Where equipment is shared, your telephones, your computers, items like that, there again, it should be cleaned, deep cleaned after every change of staff. And this will have quite a serious impact on your organizations in terms of facilities managers. Let me just go through the changes expected. Right, the first obvious one is that there will be an increase in the staffing required, because you would need to basically deep clean more often than you may have. And there will be an increase in your cleaning equipment, your cleaning chemicals, and even your sanitizing chemicals. And we have a question on the poll during this webinar, if you have reliable suppliers in this regard. And then we at SAFMA can also assist where there is problems amongst our members. Just lastly, in terms of the soft services, there can be different changes, various changes in your toilets to allow the surfaces to be less containing of the viruses. Like you're looking at your toilet handles, your handles for your taps. These can be changed over time to allow for more using your arms or your elbows, and then that will remove the risk or minimize the risk in terms of transmission of the viruses and bacteria. Other changes, let me just have a look here. Your towels and your hand towels in your bathrooms, again, paper towel based is more preferred at this stage versus your hand dryers and your hot air dryers and your normal material towels that you can be washed. We prefer that one. And then, as I said to you, the bathrooms and toilets can be adapted to become more efficient in terms of sanitizing requirements. Okay, thanks, John. That's all from my side.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Thank you. I think a point to pick up on the alcohol, you spoke about a 70% ethanol-based alcohol. I think there's two things. One is that is a huge fire hazard. Alcohol is extremely flammable. The other problem with alcohol fires is you can't see the flame. So if it's a petroleum flame, the flame is easy to see. But an alcohol fire, the flame is almost invisible. The other thing is that ethanol, people need to be aware of, is at the basis of all alcohol drinks. So again, you might have a storage problem, but certainly the storage of alcohol-based products needs to be handled because they are actually very flammable. You're actually storing petrol or the equivalent of. Okay, the next one is Cliff. Cliff's going to talk on hard facilities management. Cliff, over to you.
Great, thanks, John, and good afternoon to all our participants, and thanks very much for joining our discussion group. The jury is definitely out as to whether our heating, ventilating, and air conditioning systems can contribute or be a facilitator in the spread of any virus or any portion of a virus. And initially, the thoughts, as we all have been made aware, the thoughts were around the fact that the spread was essentially through the droplets via sneezing or coughing or whatever. Until fairly early in the outbreak, or the early days of the outbreak, there was a case in a Chinese city in southern China, a name that I can't pronounce and I'm not going to try, where a group of visitors were in a restaurant, and none of the visitors to the restaurant were within the 2 meter or 2.5 or even 3 meter radius, and 8 visitors to that restaurant went down with the COVID-19 virus. The immediate result after a wee bit of research was that because of the spread of the virus via the air conditioning system in the restaurant, these guys had picked up the virus. So that led to the jury definitely being out as to whether air conditioning systems can or cannot contribute. There are a number of, like with anything in a situation of this nature, there are a number of experts that pop up all over the place. But there's a school of thought that says as these droplets decrease in size, which happens over time, the virus can be spread and become an airborne virus. This was sort of proven by one of the cruise liners. I think it was the Disney Cruise Lining Group that proved that because passengers had been confined to their cabins on their cruise ships, many had been infected via the virus creeping around the air ducts. So these smaller and lighter aerosol particles do, according to a number of experts, spread through our ventilation systems. So what we need to be aware of and what we need to be conscious of is the fact that although it hasn't been technologically or technically proven as yet, we need to be aware that the particles can stay airborne long enough to go through the systems and then pop up on another floor in your buildings or in other offices and so forth. You know, some guy has a sneezing attack who happens to be infected on your ground floor, and it could well end up infecting folk on the first and second floors. Of course, there's a number of ways that we as facilities managers can look at lessening that risk, such as the use of filters, drawing more fresh air into our systems. That could make a contribution. And of course, whilst we as facilities managers might be coming up with weird and wonderful schemes to do these things, our financial colleagues will be continually reminding us that whatever we do is going to have a cost implication. You know, if you put heavier filters into your systems, your energy costs are going to rise, and the like. I think the message that we need to get out there around the spreading of the virus, or any virus for that matter, via air conditioning, is one of awareness, taking into account the issues that have been covered before in terms of managing space, distance, and the soft services of life, the cleaning that Stephen covered so well, because those are intimately involved with the spread of this epidemic. Let's move on to biometrics, and in times like this, one always has a plethora of profound statements made. And I came across one made by the CEO and president of an organization called Invixium, who are leaders in the biometric industry. And his statement said, "The impact of the coronavirus pandemic will forever change the landscape of the biometric industry going forward." Now, that's one hell of a profound statement, but I think it's a very logical statement. And the sort of message that we need to get across, and the message that we need to carry, is the need for touchless access controls, touchless workforce management biometric solutions is obviously the way to go. But that doesn't mean we all going to rush out and replace the equipment that we've got. So once again, with our biometrics, we need to take into account all the hygiene factors that have been spoken about before, all the preventative issues that we need to just be mindful of, you know, the sanitizers and the like, because biometrics are not going to change overnight into touchless operations, but we certainly need to be aware of the need to make whatever we have there as safe as is humanly possible. And the same with our escalators and elevators. I mean, what's the first thing one does traditionally when you hop onto an escalator in a mall? You hang on to the side, not so. You grab onto the rail. Well, those little issues are taboo, not so. So we just need to be aware of limiting the number of people in an elevator. We need to be aware of the 1.5 or 2 meter distancing. And we need to be intimately aware of the need to control the number of people that are using escalators and lifts at any given time. And that has been covered very adequately earlier in this discussion. But as facilities managers, I think the trick is one of awareness, 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 and ensuring that our environments are safe. That's me done and dusted. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Cliff. Thank you. Right. I think that there are a couple of questions that have come up from the previous webinar. One of them was the impact of the masks and on people wearing them for a long time, and possible CO2 buildup behind the mask. Any of the panelists like to put up their hand on that? David, Cliff, Andrew, or Stephen, on the use of masks? David, probably you closest.
Yeah, I've not had an answer on that one as yet. I don't think it's been tested, but you know, the masks are breathable. So my personal opinion, I think, you know, unless you you need to wash them, you need to be, you know, to keep them clean. So, but I will maybe pose it to our clinical team and see if they've got any insight.
John, if I can
Right,
just...
yeah, David? Sorry, Andrew?
John, if I can put a question back to you. Surgeons stand on their feet and do 8-hour operations wearing surgical masks. So I don't think there's a risk there, to be honest with you.
Okay, thanks for that. On the management of staff, there's a question here. When you're standing in line and someone's coming to take your temperature, what's the risk there? Because patently, I guess, social spacing becomes a problem. Any comment there on how you manage that? Yeah,
I actually did put an answer on the chat around that. The commercial temperature takers use a laser, and so they can be used at a distance. The cheaper ones use an infrared, and you have to get closer. But I mean, obviously, any temperature is better. Then you just need to provide both people the PPE for the period that temperature is being taken.
Okay. A question again from last week, which is an interesting one. So I'll do a bit of a lead in. Being it's in the literature, they have established that they can measure COVID-19 infections through the sewage flow. So patently the virus is alive and well in the sewage flow. We can say that after the sewage has gone through treatment and through certainly RO treatment on water, 99.99% of all bacteria and viruses are removed. So if nothing else, your bottled water is perfectly safe. And given the time that the virus is floating around, I guess your tap water is pretty safe as well. The other thing is the chlorine in the water will take out your virus. So on the basis that your water supply is chlorinated, which most of the major metros it is, well, it's all supposed to be, but in the major metros, the plants are working. Provided you've got a chlorinated water supply and you've got a residual chlorine, you're probably okay. Then the question, so that's on the liquid waste side. I think the learning point is if you're putting people to work on sewers, which are live, you may be exposing them to the virus, because if there's someone infected in the building, you may have the virus in your sewage flow. The one is the solid waste. What steps are we taking on solid waste, where, for instance, people are handling packaging, they're maybe throwing masks away, throwing gloves away, and it's going in the waste. We've spoken a lot on the upstream side of the workplace, but unfortunately, all the FMs, we always get down and dirty in this game, and the solid waste stream is one of them. So what comments we got from the panel on managing the solid waste stream? Anyone? Okay, Cliff, anything from you? There's an idea for you.
There's no ideas in this mind about that at the moment, except being...
Okay, David, you're in the real life.
Just being ultra cautious and ultra careful.
Yeah.
Yes, if I could make a comment
don't do anything
on the waste.
Okay, Stephen?
Yes, what we as facilities managers should do is our staff and the companies that are handling the waste must take further precautions and have further PPEs so they do not get infected by handling the waste. And in this case, even though many countries don't support the use of gloves, but certainly in waste removal and even little bins at the offices, the facilities management staff must have their PPEs in place so that they don't get infected by touching waste that has some of the bugs on it. Yeah, certainly.
Okay, thanks for that.
Sorry, John, just to add for that on that.
Yes, David.
So PPE for me is very, very clear and awareness from cleaning companies and assisting them in performing this task. The other thing was on the water, on the chlorine, just for that to be checked. We've had cases whereby the chlorine level in the water supplied by municipality was below the recommended level. So we've had to dose our own chlorine into our tanks to ensure the correct level. Just a precaution for people to take care of.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, look, the problem we've got is we're dealing with the water and sanitation supply in the big metros in which we probably reasonably comfortable. Certainly, if the water goes out of the plant with a residual level and it meets something where the chlorine is used up, bacteria, then your residual level will drop. It could be the inflow into your facility or in your own facilities. So definitely your residual levels should be checked, and also where you've got tanks that you are bringing your water in, taking it through a storage tank, and then distributing from there. That water is actually the responsibility of you, the FM, and you need to be aware that you are storing water and you need to maintain that chlorine level. And anyone that works in that area is obviously a potential to contaminate that water. We live in a very difficult time. Anyone that touches anything is potentially contaminating it.
Yeah.
Then there's a question regarding masks, is that the washable 3-ply washable mask with a filter is what is used. Do we check on masks in the workplace? Are we looking at masks, or are we just accepting that if someone wears a mask that it's okay? Anyone on that? David, have you got on that in the field? Or you?
Yeah, we're busy issuing fabric masks. I mean, some of the regulation even is stipulated that the employer needs to provide washing facilities and laundry and all the mask and ironing, which I think it's more from a factory type of environment whereby PPEs or worker uniforms are provided. It's possible over uniform rather than just a once-off issuing. So something for people that are looking after factories and things might have to do that ironing, but then I wouldn't want to use somebody else's mask even though it's been cleaned. So there's practicalities to that. In terms of checking people's masks, I think there's a social responsibility by everyone, and I'm sure people are fairly aware of their own families and their own environment and would do that themselves.
Okay, thanks very much.
John, just on masks, there's an international organization that I'm working with, and they actually issue a fresh mask to their staff every morning as they arrive at the office. The mask that they've used to on their travel to work or whatever, they put away, and they get issued with a disposable mask for use during that day. And when they leave the office at the end of the day, they dump it in a disposal box or bin. I know an
Okay.
expensive route, but they're taking all options.
Expensive, it's 30,
Yes, sir.
30 or so rand a head per day. Yes, but you know, we live in very difficult times. Definitely. So first
If
of
I
all,
could
to the
just
panelists,
give-
thanks very much for sharing the time. To all the participants in the webinar, I hope you found it useful. We can say that Andrew, David, Stephen, and Cliff, thank you. Put on a slight variation to what was said last week. So what we've had is an update from last week. It's changed over a week. And if we held the the webinar in a week's time, it'll be different again. But we're not going to do that. Next week on the 13th is Global FM Day, and there will be a different webinar there. I think we live in dynamic times, challenging times, and I think this presentation demonstrated that, in that we got a different slant on the webinar that we put on last week. So thanks very much to everyone. Thanks for joining us, and we apologize for everyone being called Teresa Stapleberg. Slight glitch in our system, but we had 55 Teresas with us, which is great. And we look forward to everyone joining us in a week's time, or just over a week, on the 13th. In fact, just under a week, that's 6 days. I'm obviously slipping with my arithmetic. So on that, thanks very much to everyone. And we look forward to seeing you next week on the Global FM webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ciao.
All I have to do is close this now.